Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles. You know that feeling? That gut-wrenching, stomach-churning feeling that something's just off? It's like walking into a room and sensing that the air has changed. Like a storm is coming, but nobody else notices the dark clouds forming overhead. That feeling had been gnawing at me for months. At first, I tried to ignore it. I chalked it up to work stress, the natural ebb and flow of marriage, and my daughters growing older and spending more time with their mother. But then the small things started piling up. The sudden late nights at work. The way my wife, Emily, kept her phone glued to her hand like it held state secrets. The way our daughters, Ava and Sophie, started acting strangely around me. Guarded, almost rehearsed, whenever I asked simple questions about their day. Emily and I had been married for 15 years. We met in college, built a life together, and had what I thought was a solid marriage. Sure, things weren't perfect, but when are they ever? I had always been a provider, working my ass off to give my family a good life. I trusted her. I loved her. But then there was the perfume. Emily had always worn a soft, floral scent, something light and subtle. But a few months ago I noticed a change, something bolder, muskier, something that lingered a little too long on her skin. I asked her about it once, jokingly. New perfume, I said, raising an eyebrow. She barely glanced up from her phone. Oh yeah, Ava picked it out for me. It was such a throwaway response, but something about it felt off. I looked at Ava, who was sitting across the room, pretending to scroll through her own phone. She froze for a fraction of a second, her body unnaturally still, before recovering and nodding. Yeah, we were at the mall, she mumbled. That was the first crack. The first moment I thought, something's not right here. But it was what happened 2 weeks later that sent me down the rabbit hole. It was a Friday night and Emily had been working late again. I was in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner, when Ava and Sophie walked in. They were whispering to each other, something hushed and urgent. As soon as they saw me, they stiffened. What's up? I asked, wiping my hands on a dish towel. Nothing, Ava said too quickly. Sophie, the younger one, looked like she wanted to say something, but Ava shot her a look, and she clamped her mouth shut. That was crack number 2. You guys have been acting weird lately? I said, keeping my tone light. Everything okay? Yeah, Dad. Ava forced a laugh. We're fine. But they weren't fine. And when I left the kitchen and went upstairs, I heard their hushed voices again. She's gonna freak out if she finds out we messed up, Sophie whispered. Shut up. She won't find out, Ava hissed. I stopped at the top of the stairs, heart pounding. Messed up? Who's she? That night, Emily came home late. Later than usual. Her hair was slightly messy, and there was a light flush to her cheeks. She walked in, smiling as if nothing was wrong. But I saw it. Something was wrong. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. Good night at work? She hesitated for just a fraction of a second before forcing a smile. Yeah, busy, right? And then her phone buzzed. She grabbed it quickly, too quickly, and turned slightly away as she read the screen. Everything okay? I asked, my voice casual. She nodded. Yeah, just work stuff. I'm exhausted. I'm gonna head up to bed. She pecked me on the cheek and walked off, leaving me standing there, staring at the spot where she had been. That was crack number 3. The final crack, the one that sent my suspicions spiraling into certainty, came the following week. I had always trusted my daughters, but I wasn't stupid. They were young, impressionable, and incredibly close to their mother. They told her things they didn't tell me, and that was fine. But now I needed to know if they were keeping secrets. One evening, while Emily was in the shower, I walked into Ava's room casually. Hey kiddo, can I borrow your charger? She was on her phone and panicked the second she saw me. She shoved the device under her pillow so fast you'd think it was a grenade. My stomach dropped. Ava. What? She snapped. Too defensive, too quick. It's just a text from Sophie. God. Dad. Do you always have to barge in? I stayed quiet for a beat, studying her. Then I nodded. Right? Sorry. I left her room, but the second I closed the door, I stood outside and listened. After a few seconds, I heard her whisper, "Oh my God, that was close." And I knew my own daughters were hiding something from me. From that moment on, I became a man on a mission. I started watching closely. I took note of every late night, every whispered conversation, every glance between Emily and the girls when I asked simple questions. And slowly, the picture started forming. Emily had a new boss, some hotshot executive she had mentioned in passing a few months ago. I never thought much of it until I started paying attention, until I saw the way her eyes lit up when she talked about him, until I noticed the way Ava would quickly change the subject whenever I asked about Mom's work. Until Sophie, sweet, innocent Sophie, let slip one night, "I don't know why Mom doesn't just..." Before Ava cut her off with a sharp glare. The final puzzle piece fell into place the night I checked the phone bill. Emily had hundreds of texts to a number I didn't recognize. Hundreds. So I called it. And when the deep, smug voice of a man answered with a lazy, "Hello," I finally knew. My wife was cheating on me, and my daughters had helped her keep it a secret. They had chosen her over me. At that moment, something inside me snapped. I wasn't just going to expose this affair. I was going to make them all pay. I was going nuclear. Betrayal isn't a sudden blow. It's a slow, creeping rot. A sickness that festers in the shadows until it finally bursts open, revealing the ugly truth beneath. I had spent years believing my family was whole, solid, unshakable. That belief had been a lie. And now I was staring at the proof. The night I called that unknown number, I stood in the kitchen, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. The voice on the other end was smooth, confident, arrogant. "Hello." 2 syllables. That was all it took. I didn't recognize the voice, but I knew. "Who is this?" I asked, keeping my tone steady. A brief pause. Then, a chuckle. "Who's this?" He countered, lazy, unfazed. Like this was a game to him. I hung up before I could say something I'd regret. The moment I ended the call, I knew 2 things for certain. My wife was having an affair. She was comfortable enough with this man to be reckless. The sheer volume of texts meant this wasn't just physical. This wasn't some fling. It was emotional, and that made it 1,000 times worse. I sat in the living room for hours, staring at nothing, my mind a storm of thoughts. The sounds of the house, the faint hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of the floorboards, felt too loud, like the house itself was mocking me. Emily was upstairs. Our daughters were in their rooms, probably texting her, letting her know I was acting strange. The walls felt like they were closing in. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. That would be giving her too much power, letting her control the narrative. I needed proof. Ironclad, undeniable proof. And I knew exactly where to start. The first break in the armor. The next morning, Emily acted normal. Too normal. "Morning, Han," she chirped, brushing past me to grab coffee. She was dressed for work. Sharp blazer, pencil skirt, perfume just strong enough to be noticed. The same new scent. I forced a smile. "Morning." She sipped her coffee, scrolling through her phone, probably texting him. My stomach twisted, but I swallowed the rage. "Got any big meetings today?" I asked casually. She hesitated for the briefest second. "Barely noticeable." Yeah, just a couple." "Liar." I nodded. "Anything with your boss?" Her grip tightened on the mug. Another tiny hesitation. "Nope. Just the usual stuff." I knew that was a lie too. After she left, I went upstairs and knocked on Ava's door. "Yeah?" she called. I stepped in, keeping my expression neutral. Ava was sitting on her bed, phone in hand, looking way too tense for a casual morning. "Hey," I said, leaning against the doorframe. "Got a second?" She forced a smile. "Sure." I sat on the edge of her bed, watching her closely. "You and Mom have been spending a lot of time together lately." Ava shrugged. "I guess. You know, I used to think you told me everything." A flicker of something, guilt, fear, crossed her face. "Dad, what's this about?" I sighed, rubbing my temples. I need to know. Is there something going on with Mom?" Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and in that split second I knew. I reached over, faster than she expected, and grabbed the phone from her hands. "Dad!" she shrieked, lunging for it. I stood, holding it out of reach. "Ava, what are you hiding?" "Nothing," she snapped, eyes wild. "Give it back." I turned the screen on. A single text message lit up the screen. "Mom, don't say anything to Dad. We'll talk later." I felt like I had been punched in the gut. Ava was frozen, her face pale. "How long have you known?" I asked quietly. She shook her head, tears forming in her eyes. "Dad, please." "How long?" Her lip trembled. She looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "A while," she whispered. The words nearly broke me. My own daughter, my own flesh and blood had helped hide this from me. The second betrayal. I stormed into Sophie's room next. She was younger, more naive. Maybe she would tell me the truth. She was sitting at her desk, headphones on, completely oblivious to the emotional war zone outside her door. "Sophie." She turned, smiling. "Hey, Dad. How long have you known about Mom's affair?" Her face crumpled. That was all the answer I needed. I backed up, hands shaking. "Unbelievable." "Dad, wait." Sophie jumped up, grabbing my arm. "It's not what you think." I yanked away. "Don't. Just don't." The breaking point. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in my office, staring at the phone records, rereading the texts between Emily and her boss. Every second was a fresh knife to the gut. At 11:30 p.m., the front door creaked open. Emily was home. I heard her heels click against the floor as she moved toward the stairs. I stepped into the hallway, blocking her path. She gasped, startled. "Jesus, you scared me." I didn't say anything. She frowned. "Are you okay?" I held up her phone bill. The pages crinkled in my grip. "Who the hell is he?" Her face went ghost white. What are you talking about?" she stammered. I took a step closer. Don't lie to me, Emily." She swallowed hard, glancing toward the stairs, probably wondering if the girls could hear. "Let's talk about this in the morning," she whispered. I laughed, cold, bitter. "No. Now." She hesitated, then straightened her shoulders. "You're being ridiculous." I threw the phone bill at her feet. "Hundreds of texts, Emily. Late nights. Secret meetings. Don't you dare gaslight me." Her eyes darted around, panic creeping in. It's not what you think." "Oh, so you weren't screwing your boss behind my back?" She flinched. "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." I roared. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. "You know what hurts the most?" I whispered. "Not just that you cheated, but that our daughters helped you hide it." Her breath hitched. She knew. She knew I had figured it out. "James, please." I stepped back, shaking my head. "You've already lost me, Emily. But now, I'm going to make sure you lose everything." Her face crumpled. "James, no." But I wasn't listening anymore. I had work to do. Rage is a fire. Left unchecked, it burns wildly, uncontrolled, consuming everything in its path. But when harnessed, when focused, it becomes something else. It becomes a weapon, and I was about to wield mine with precision. Emily thought she had me backed into a corner. She believed I would either break down in devastation or rage blindly, making mistakes in my fury. But she underestimated me. I wasn't going to lose control. I was going to take control. The first thing I did was secure the hard evidence. I had the phone records, yes, but I needed undeniable proof. Something that neither Emily nor her smug, home-wrecking boss could talk their way out of. I hired a private investigator. Frank, a bulldog of a man with a permanent scowl, had a reputation for being ruthless when it came to cheating spouses. I handed him everything I had so far, phone logs, dates, locations, and told him to get me more. "I need concrete proof. Pictures, videos, everything." Frank nodded. "You got it." 2 days later, he delivered. Frank's evidence was damning. High-quality pictures of Emily and her boss. His name was Richard Carrington, by the way, the CEO of her company, meeting at hotels, holding hands, kissing. One particularly sickening video showed them laughing together at a bar, his hand resting possessively on her thigh, her smiling up at him like a lovesick schoolgirl. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was happy about it. I nearly punched a hole in the wall. But no, I had to stay focused. Revenge was coming. And it was going to be nuclear. Emily's affair wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was professional misconduct. A high-ranking executive sleeping with a subordinate? That was golden. So I packaged Frank's evidence into a neat little email, photos, videos, timestamps, and sent it to HR, the board of directors, and the company's investors. With a single click, I detonated Richard Carrington's career. Within hours, chaos erupted. The company issued an emergency statement. Richard was placed on immediate leave pending investigation. Employees gossiped. Investors panicked. Emily came home that night white as a sheet. "James," she whispered, "something happened at work today." "Oh." I leaned back in my chair, feigning ignorance. "Trouble in paradise?" Her lips parted, searching for words. They're investigating Richard." I took a slow sip of my whiskey. Wonder how that happened." She went stiff. Her eyes widened. And she knew. Emily and I had a joint account. But I had my own accounts too. Ones she never bothered to ask about. That meant while she was busy playing house with Richard, I was quietly preparing for war. The morning after her work imploded, I went to the bank. I moved every single dollar from our joint account into my private one. I froze Emily's credit cards. I contacted our mortgage lender and had all payments rerouted to me. By the time Emily figured it out, she had nothing. That evening, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her phone in panic. "James," she croaked, "there's something wrong with my cards." "Oh yeah," I shrugged. "I fixed that problem. You see, I figured since you didn't need me anymore, you wouldn't need my money either." She blanched. You can't do that." I tilted my head. "Why not? You sure as hell didn't ask permission to screw your boss. So why should I ask permission to protect my assets?" She opened and closed her mouth, speechless. I smiled. "And by the way, good luck paying rent this month." Her face crumbled. She wasn't ready for this. Ava and Sophie had betrayed me, but they were still young, impressionable, and right now, they thought their mother was the strong one, the victim. I needed to shatter that illusion. One evening, I called them both into the living room. Emily wasn't home. She had started staying out late, probably trying to do damage control. I sat them down and, without a single ounce of hesitation, showed them everything. Every picture, every video, every text message. I watched as the color drained from their faces. Sophie's lips trembled. Mom really did this." Ava was silent, staring at the evidence with wide, horrified eyes. I leaned forward, my voice calm but firm. "I need you both to understand something," I said. "I didn't leave your mother. She left me. She left us." Silence. Then Sophie burst into tears. Ava sat frozen, guilt etched into every line of her face. They knew. They finally knew. After weeks of dodging me, Emily finally broke. One night, she stormed into the house, furious. "You're ruining my life," she shrieked, slamming her purse onto the counter. "Richard is getting fired. My coworkers think I'm a slut. I have no money because of you. And now the girls won't even look at me." I stood up slowly. "Good." She staggered. What?" I took a step closer. My voice was quiet, deadly. "Good," I repeated. "You deserve every second of it." Tears welled in her eyes. No. I cut her off. "You don't get to cry, Emily. You don't get to act like you're the victim. You did this." She gasped. We can fix this." I laughed. Actually laughed. "Fix this?" I echoed. "Emily, we are so far past fixing that it's a joke." She reached for me. "James, please. I still love you." I took a step back. "You love me? You loved Richard 5 nights ago at the Hilton. You loved him when you dragged our daughters into this. You don't love me, Emily. You love power. And now that it's gone." I smiled. "You're nothing." She collapsed into sobs. And I walked out. I filed for divorce the next day. I went after everything. Full custody of the girls, thanks to the evidence I had. The house, spousal support, not a damn dime. Emily was left with nothing. Richard Carrington? Fired, disgraced, blacklisted. His wife took him for everything in his divorce. Emily ended up in a tiny apartment, scraping by on what little money she had left. And as for me, I walked away free. My daughters were mine again. And my nuclear revenge? Perfectly executed. Rage is a fire. Left unchecked, it burns wildly, uncontrolled, consuming everything in its path. But when harnessed, when focused, it becomes something else. It becomes a weapon. And I was about to wield mine with precision. Emily thought she had me backed into a corner. She believed I would either crumble in devastation or lash out recklessly, making mistakes in my fury. But she underestimated me. I wasn't going to lose control. I was going to take control. The first step was securing proof that neither she nor her smug boss, Richard Carrington, could explain away. I hired a private investigator, a seasoned professional named Frank who had seen it all. I handed him everything I had, phone records, locations, dates, and told him to get me more. I needed hard, irrefutable evidence. Photos, videos, timestamps, anything that would make denial impossible. Frank didn't disappoint. 2 days later, he placed an envelope on my desk. Inside were high-resolution pictures of Emily and Richard meeting in hotels, their hands lingering too long, their gazes too intimate. A video clip showed them at a dimly lit bar, his hand resting on her thigh as she leaned into him, her expression filled with something I hadn't seen directed at me in years, a sickening happiness. She wasn't just having an affair. She was thriving in it. I gripped the edge of my desk, willing myself not to destroy something. I wasn't finished yet. This was just the beginning. Emily's affair wasn't just a betrayal of our marriage. It was professional misconduct. Richard was the CEO of her company, and their relationship was a violation of ethics policies, if not outright illegal. So I put everything Frank had collected into a neatly packaged email, attached every damning file, and sent it off. The recipients, the company's HR department, the board of directors, and several major investors. Then I waited. The fallout was immediate. Within hours, Richard was placed on an immediate leave of absence pending an internal investigation. Panic spread like wildfire in the company, rumors running rampant. Employees whispered in hushed tones. The stock took a slight dip as uncertainty seeped through the cracks of leadership. That night, Emily came home looking like she had seen a ghost. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands shaking as she scrolled through her phone. She looked up at me, her face pale. "Something happened at work today." I took a sip of my whiskey, barely looking at her. "Oh? What happened?" "They're investigating Richard." Her voice wavered. I tilted my head. Wonder why?" Her eyes widened, realization slamming into her like a freight train. She knew. She knew I had done it. Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. What could she say? I didn't give her a chance to scramble for excuses. I left the room, knowing full well that this was only the start of her nightmare. The next morning, while she tried to salvage whatever was left of her career, I went to the bank. For years, we had a joint account, but I had always kept my own private accounts, the ones she never bothered asking about. That was my safety net. And now it was my weapon. I drained our joint account, moving every last cent into my private savings. I froze her credit cards, rerouted our mortgage payments under my name, and revoked her access to any of our shared financial accounts. By the time Emily tried to buy her morning coffee, she was in for a rude awakening. When she came home that evening, she was frantic. "James, something's wrong with my cards," she blurted out, dropping her purse onto the counter. I didn't even look up. "Oh yeah, I fixed that problem. Since you didn't need me anymore, I figured you wouldn't need my money either." Her breath hitched. You can't do that." I finally met her eyes, my gaze cold. "Why not? You sure as hell didn't ask permission to screw your boss. So why should I ask permission to protect my assets?" She just stood there, her mouth opening and closing, searching for something to say. I watched as the realization set in. She had nothing. I leaned forward. And by the way, good luck paying rent this month. Her face crumpled. She wasn't ready for this. I still had unfinished business. My daughters had helped her hide the affair, and while I wasn't going to hurt them the way their mother had hurt me, I wasn't going to let them get away with it either. They needed to understand exactly what they had been a part of. One evening, I called them into the living room. Emily was out, most likely trying to clean up the mess she had made. I sat them down and placed the folder on the coffee table. "Look at it," I said quietly. Ava hesitated, but Sophie reached forward, flipping open the envelope. And then the truth unraveled before their eyes. The photos, the texts, the screenshots, proof of their mother's betrayal. Ava's fingers trembled as she turned the pages. Sophie gasped, her eyes filling with tears. "Mom! Mom really did this." Sophie's voice was barely above a whisper. Ava was silent, her face frozen in shock. I took a deep breath. "I need you both to understand something. I didn't leave your mother. She left me. She left us." The weight of my words crushed the room into silence. Then Sophie started crying. Ava's hands balled into fists as the guilt set in. I had no words left. I let them sit in it, let them feel every ounce of betrayal, let them realize that the woman they had been protecting was nothing more than a liar. Emily's downfall was inevitable. A week after the workplace scandal, she came storming into the house, furious. "You're ruining my life," she shrieked, slamming her purse onto the counter. "Richard is getting fired. My coworkers think I'm a slut. I have no money because of you. And now the girls won't even look at me." I stood up slowly, adjusting my sleeves. "Good." Her entire body jerked, as if I had physically struck her. What? Good?" I repeated, my voice as cold as steel. "You deserve every second of it." Tears welled in her eyes. No. I cut her off. "You don't get to cry, Emily. You don't get to act like you're the victim. You did this." She gasped. We can fix this." I laughed. A real, genuine laugh. "Fix this?" I echoed. "Emily, we are so far past fixing that it's a joke." She took a step toward me, reaching for my arm. "James, please. I still love you." I took a step back. "You love me? You loved Richard 5 nights ago at the Hilton. You loved him when you dragged our daughters into this. You don't love me, Emily. You love power. And now that it's gone." I smiled, slow and sharp. "You're nothing." She collapsed into sobs. I walked past her, grabbing my coat. The next day I filed for divorce. I went after everything. Full custody of the girls, the house, every last asset. Emily was left with nothing. Richard Carrington was fired, blacklisted, and hit with a lawsuit from his wife. He lost everything too. And as for me, I walked away free. My daughters were mine again. And my revenge? Perfectly executed. Emily was unraveling. I could see it in the way she carried herself, the way her once smug and confident demeanor had been reduced to desperation. Every move I made had stripped away a piece of the power she thought she held. Now, she was standing on the edge of a cliff, barely holding on, and I was about to give her the final push. She had lost her job. Richard had been fired, his name dragged through the mud by the very company he built. His wife had hit him with a brutal divorce, seizing half of his fortune and leaving him bleeding financially. And Emily? She had nowhere to go. I had cut off every lifeline. No job, no money, no support. But there was one more thing left to do. One final act to make sure she understood that betraying me wasn't just a mistake. It was the worst decision of her life. I sat across from my lawyer, an old friend of mine named Dan, who had handled high-stakes divorces before. He was reviewing my case, nodding with quiet satisfaction. "She's done for," he said. "With the evidence you have, the judge is going to eat her alive. You'll get full custody, no spousal support, and she'll be left with nothing." "That's the idea," I replied. Dan smirked. "You know, most guys in your situation just want to move on. But you're You're burning the whole damn house down. I leaned forward. She didn't just betray me, Dan. She involved our daughters. She made them complicit in her lies. She thought she was untouchable. Dan chuckled, shaking his head. Well, let's make sure she never forgets it. The courtroom was packed. Emily sat across from me, looking like a shell of the woman I had once married. Her once pristine clothes were replaced with cheaper, less polished outfits. There were dark circles under her eyes, signs of the stress eating away at her. She had tried to fight back, had attempted to paint me as the bitter, vengeful husband who was out to destroy her. But the evidence was too overwhelming. The judge barely even acknowledged her weak attempts to shift the blame. Full custody was awarded to me. No spousal support. She was ordered to vacate the house within 2 weeks. Emily broke down in court, sobbing into her hands, but I felt nothing. The woman I once loved was gone. Now she was just another casualty of her own arrogance. A few nights later, I was sitting on the back porch with Ava and Sophie. The girls had been distant ever since everything came crashing down. They were struggling to reconcile what had happened, and I didn't blame them. Dad? Sophie said quietly, staring at her hands. Do you hate us? The question hit me harder than I expected. I set my drink down and turned to them. No, I said firmly. I don't hate you, but I won't lie and say I wasn't hurt. What you two did, it broke me. Ava flinched, guilt flashing across her face. But, I continued, you're my daughters, and I love you both. That will never change. Sophie wiped at her eyes, sniffling. Ava looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I sighed. Your mother made you believe she was the victim. She manipulated you. I don't blame you for that. But from now on, I need honesty. No more secrets. They both nodded, their expressions solemn. It would take time, but I was willing to rebuild. Emily had 2 weeks to leave the house, but she was gone in 5 days. I didn't ask where she went. I didn't care. Her name was removed from everything, bank accounts, property titles, even the family phone plan. It was as if she had never existed in our lives. A few weeks later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that she had moved into a tiny apartment on the outskirts of town. Richard, once the powerful CEO, was now just another disgraced executive, scraping by on what little dignity he had left. I wondered if Emily still thought it was all worth it. If she still believed that betraying me, lying to our daughters, throwing away everything we built was worth the fleeting attention of a man who was now just as ruined as she was. I doubted it, but it didn't matter anymore, because I had won, and she had lost everything. The dust had settled. The war was over, and I had won. Emily was gone. The house was mine. My daughters, though still struggling with the weight of everything, were by my side. Richard Carrington had faded into irrelevance, his name now synonymous with disgrace. His power, his influence, his wealth, it was all meaningless now. He was just another cautionary tale, a man who had flown too close to the sun and plummeted into the abyss. Emily's descent had been just as brutal. I heard whispers of her struggles. She was jobless, rejected by every respectable firm in town thanks to the scandal. Word spread quickly in professional circles. No one wanted to hire someone known for workplace affairs, especially when it had cost an entire company its reputation. She was living in a cramped, one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. Gone were the designer clothes, the expensive hair treatments, the high-end dinners she once flaunted. She was surviving off temporary jobs and whatever scraps she could find. And yet, despite all of this, I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no lingering anger, just nothing. One evening, I was sitting on the back porch, a beer in hand, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Ava and Sophie were inside, laughing about something, their voices filling the house with warmth again. It had taken time, but they were healing. Ava had been the hardest to reach. She had been Emily's closest ally, her most loyal defender. She had believed, wholeheartedly, that her mother had done no wrong, until the truth had been laid bare. One night she had finally broken down. I was so stupid, she had whispered through tears. I believed her. I I didn't want to think she was lying to me, to us. I had pulled her into a hug, feeling her shake in my arms. "She's your mother," I had said gently. "You wanted to believe the best in her. That doesn't make you stupid." "But I hurt you," she had choked out. I had closed my eyes, exhaling slowly. "Yes, you did." She had flinched, but I had kept going. "But I also know you weren't trying to. You were caught in the middle of something that should have never involved you." She had looked up at me then, her eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in months. "Hope. I just want us to be okay again," she had murmured. And we were getting there. Sophie had been the first to forgive herself, but Ava had taken longer. Now, though, they were returning to the girls I once knew. We had inside jokes again. We had late-night movie marathons. We had real conversations, ones not tainted by secrecy and lies. We were a family again. It was a cold, rainy evening when I got the call. I glanced at the screen, my stomach twisting when I saw the name, Emily. For a brief moment I debated letting it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I answered. There was silence on the other end before a shaky breath filled the line. "James." Her voice was hoarse, weak, nothing like the woman I once knew. I said nothing. She sniffled. I don't know why I called." I leaned back in my chair, exhaling. "Neither do I." More silence. Then, a broken whisper. "Are they okay?" I didn't need to ask who she meant. "They're fine," I said evenly. "Better than fine, actually." Another sniffle. "That's good." I could tell she wanted to say more, to apologize, to explain, maybe even to ask if there was any way back. But there wasn't. We were too far gone. "I'm sorry," she finally choked out. I let the words hang between us, absorbing them, weighing them. Then I simply said, "I know," and I hung up. Life moved forward. Emily faded from our world, no longer a presence in our lives. Richard's name stopped coming up in conversations. The scandal became old news, replaced by newer gossip. And I found peace. It didn't happen all at once. Healing isn't a straight line. Some nights were hard. Some memories still stung. But little by little I reclaimed my life. I focused on my daughters, on rebuilding trust, on making sure they knew they were safe, that they were loved. And one day, I woke up and realized I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't broken. I was just me again. And that was the greatest revenge of all. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.